Hi, debaters. Welcome to part 3 of a 2024-2025 topic lecture on the intellectual property topic. In this section, we will cover affirmative and negative arguments on the topic. If you haven't watched the other two videos, I would really encourage you to do that first because it will give you a lot of context about what we're talking about here. This lecture will have 3 parts. The first part is about likely affirmatives, and we'll talk about top likely affirmatives in all 3 of the topic areas. The second part will be about the separation of powers and how the government works in terms of relationship to intellectual property and how that plays out politically. And then the third part will have other likely neg arguments. So we'll start with likely affs. Some initial copyright AF ideas include an AI database affirmative that would require licensing for generative AI created using copyrighted material. So right now, licensing is not required when generative AI uses material to train on. So for example, if you've ever used ChatGPT, you have used a generative AI machine, and that it has been training based on all sorts of books and newspapers and magazines and other things that are already copyrighted in order to learn about the world and in order to learn about writing styles and how to write things. And a lot of those authors of those works would like that to be copyrighted. They think that it should be a copyright violation to train using their material. And so this would require licensing for that. Another affirmative is about AI ownership. It would allow AI to own the creative works it creates. So if AI writes a poem or if AI writes a song, the ownership of that is not assigned to the AI right now. And this would assign that to the AI. A third one is about standards development organizations. And these are organizations that write standards for use by others. Right now, these organizations, if they write a standard that's for private use, that has copyright. But if they write a standard that's then used by the government, when the federal government incorporates that standard, it is not considered copyrightable anymore because U.S. government works are not copyrightable. We talked about that in the second video. The standards development organizations argue that that kills their profitability, and that's essential to maintaining standards across different organizations and bureaucracy and that sort of thing. A fourth copyright affirmative that you might see this year concerns deepfakes and has the question about whether you own your own likeness. If somebody uses a video of you or a picture of you to say things that you would not say, right now they can do that. And if they can't do that, it's not because of copyright. And so this would be an AF that deals with deepfakes in the area of copyright. And the last one is about animal copyrights, whether a work produced by an animal can be owned by that animal. The courts have currently said no to that. So, for example, you may have heard it's often referred to as the monkey selfie case, where a primate, a non-human primate, took a picture using a camera that a photographer had set up in a field, and that selfie that the primate took, the photographer argued that it was his copyright, that he owned that picture. And PETA, the animal rights organization, sued on behalf of the primate, saying that it should be owned by the primate. They lost that case, and the photographer retained the copyright. And so the question is whether animals can own their own copyrights. Some additional patent AF ideas. There's a whole bunch here, and frankly, I probably could have created 3 more slides of these, but these are some of the biggies that you might encounter as you get started, and there will be definitely more in this area. The first is the Patent Eligibility Restoration Act, or PARA. This act does a whole bunch of things, but the primary thing that it would likely do that would be relevant for affirmative advantages is that would allow certain software and medical patents that are currently deemed ineligible to be patented. A lot of medical devices are not patentable because they're sort of developed by a computer or are seen as obvious. And so this would change the way that courts have interpreted what is patentable and have Congress sort of clarify what's patentable. There's an AI ownership AF here too. It's the same argument as the AI copyright AF, but instead of being about creative works created by AI, it's about inventions developed by AI. There's a pharmaceutical march-in affirmative that would prevent the federal government from seizing and forced licensing patents from pharma companies. So right now, if you have a vaccine patent and the federal government believes that that vaccine is necessary to the public health, they can come in and force you to license it or force license it for you and seize that patent. This would prevent that. There's a similar but perhaps larger AF that does the same question, stops waivers for biotech patents and doesn't allow the federal government to waive biotech patents in certain circumstances that they could maybe do that now. There's an AF that relates to the Patent Trial and Appeal Board, the PTAB, which is a board that allows just about anyone to sue and say a patent shouldn't have been granted. This affirmative would either reform or eliminate the Patent Trial and Appeal Board and thus limit who could challenge a patent. This would significantly strengthen patents because it would mean that only certain organizations would be able to challenge a specific patent. It would dramatically limit who could challenge existing patents. There are also other countries that don't have patents heard by regular courts. They have special patent courts. And so one way to potentially strengthen existing patents would be to create a specialized set of patent courts that might be more likely to uphold existing patents. We talked earlier in the second video about how slow the USPTO is, the Patent and Trademark Office. One idea would be to either fast track patent approval or fast track patent suits, meaning that the suits themselves would be fast tracked as they move their way through the judicial system. They would not sort of wait in the same line as all sorts of other cases. Another idea is patent fee shifting. That's a circumstance where if you lose a patent case, you would pay the fees for your opponent, the person you sued, and that would create a situation where it might reduce frivolous lawsuits challenging existing patents because the company would know that if they challenged a patent and lost, they'd have to pay the company who owns the patent for their legal fees. Another idea would be to expand patent fee waivers or fee reductions. We talked earlier about how it can be hard for small corporations or small businesses or new startups to get patents, that it can be very expensive for them. The USPTO does have some reductions in fees for smaller organizations, but the plan could expand those pretty significantly or waive them altogether for first-time filers. We talked earlier about how the United States has a first to file system, meaning it's not the person who invents the product, but the person who first files it. That's a change. We could shift back to the first to invent system. There are some people say that would be a more effective means of keeping the patent courts moving and also keep it more strongly reward first inventors in an area. We could extend the patent terms. Patents, are limited depending on what kind of patent it is, whether it's a plant patent or other types of patents, a design patent or a utility patent. There are different amounts of time that a patent exists. You could expand those and have people maintain patents much longer and argue that leads to, more incentive to patent things. And finally, there's an indigenous knowledge area AF, which I think could also certainly be in the area of copyrights and trademarks as well, but it would allow a significant expansion of the ability to patent, trademark, or copyright indigenous knowledge that has previously been considered either obvious or been offered to the corporation who filed it first, no matter how long it has existed in indigenous groups. Certainly because we have a first to file system, if an indigenous cure for something is patented, but it is patented by the corporation that decides to patent it first, even if it has existed for a really long time in indigenous groups, that could create situations where they no longer have access to their own cures. As mentioned earlier, trademarks is probably going to be the smallest area of the topic, but there are a couple things I did want to mention here. One is a third-party seller's affirmative, which would hold third-party sellers of counterfeit goods liable for trademark violations. So if you've ever seen a website that's selling a knockoff of a watch or a purse or some other product, right now only the person who produced that product is liable for the trademark violation. This would hold the website that sells it also liable for the trademark violation, which would significantly reduce trademark violations, or at least that's the idea there. Another one is a dead trademarks affirmative. This would allow trademark protection to continue even when a company stops using the trademark. This would mean that companies that, for example, abandon previously racist imagery associated with their brand could stop using that altogether, stop selling it, and not allow other companies able to capture it. Right now, for example, the Cleveland Guardians still sell some products under their former name, and they do that allegedly because otherwise another person could come in and capture that trademark if they stopped using it in commerce. So this affirmative would allow dead trademarks to continue to have some trademark protection in certain cases. It's also important to talk about the separation of powers and the politics of intellectual property. So we're going to do that now. As you probably know, we have three branches in the federal government: the legislative, executive, and judicial branches, and all are involved in intellectual property. The legislative branch is in charge of making and creating the laws and clarifying them in certain circumstances. So for example, the Leahy-Smith America Invents Act in 2011 switched the U.S. from the first to invent system to the first to file system, and created the post-grant review process, the PTAB, that we talked about just a minute ago when we were talking about affirmatives. And the federal government, or the legislative branch, is also the one that would do something like the PARA. The executive branch issues regulations that interpret those existing laws. So they clarify eligibility for patent applications. And in particular, the Department of Commerce houses the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, which, as discussed earlier, has no federal funding. It's funded entirely by fees, and Congress actually takes about 10% of their funding from them. They are in charge of registering and monitoring trademark, examining patent applications by assigning them to an examining group, and searching for prior art, and establishing novelty and non-obviousness. So all of that happens within the Patent and Trademark Office, or the USPTO, within the Department of Commerce. And then finally, within the executive branch, under the Library of Congress, is the Copyright Office. That's a much smaller office, but they are in charge of registering and monitoring existing copyrights. The judicial branch interprets existing laws through individual cases. So, for example, a case like Alice Corp versus CLS Bank International, which determined the patentability of software. Some of the AFs that we've talked about earlier, like the PARA, argue that the Supreme Court, and the judicial branch in particular, has sort of overreached in limiting patent applications. And so we should, have the legislative branch sort of restore some previous patentability. But in any case, the judicial branch is able to determine what is patentable, and interpret existing laws. That starts with the Federal Circuit Court of Appeals. If the Federal Circuit Court of Appeals, then it gets appealed from there to the district courts. And then it could theoretically get appealed all the way to the Supreme Court, but most of the time it does not. Most of the time it would stop at the district court. The Supreme Court takes on a court case related to IP every couple of years, but those tend to be major AFs. So major cases that make their way to the Supreme Court only every 3 or 4 years. But in debate, certainly the Supreme Court could be involved because of the existence of fiat. So let's talk about the politics of intellectual property. So there's about $700 million of IP lobbying annually, and there are 400 registered lobbying companies actively engaged in lobbying the federal government on IP-related issues. Some of the biggest ones are in software and other technology. Some of the other ones are in media, in biotechnology or the pharmaceutical industry, or Alphabet, which is also known as Google, are some of the biggest lobbyists in the federal government right now. This chart is a little bit old, but it does give you sort of an idea here of the top 48 federal lobbying clients. This was as of 2015. Most of these are still lobbying, and the top 40 federal donors in different categories. And so it sort of shows you the overlap between different categories. You definitely don't need to remember all of this, but it is important to understand that different companies are part of different lobbying groups, and that they together can be part of the same lobbying group or different lobbying groups. The same company can be part of multiple lobbying groups. And at different times, they're on different sides of particular issues. So sometimes a company is on the pro intellectual property, strong intellectual property side, and sometimes they want weaker intellectual property. In addition to politically based arguments and arguments based on what part of the government is involved in the intellectual property being issued, there are some other negative arguments that we want to talk about. First, in the category of disadvantages are innovation disadvantage, or link turns. If the affirmative has an innovation advantage, the negative can link turn that advantage by saying, actually, instead of helping innovation, you harm innovation, you make innovation worse. Similarly, if the affirmative doesn't have an innovation advantage, the negative can just read that as a disadvantage. There are economics and inflation-based arguments that say that increasing protection of intellectual property would hurt the economy, hurt certain kinds of businesses, which would cause problems for the economy, whether that's inflation or difficulties in other areas. There are certainly industry disadvantages. So, for example, the affirmative that would require licensing for generative artificial intelligence, that would be strongly opposed by the artificial intelligence industry. And so you can read a disadvantages based on the AI industry. There are lots of other examples where an industry might be disadvantaged by stronger patent protection or stronger copyright or trademark protection in a particular area. And so they would complain and they would write pretty good link cards saying that this will destroy our industry. There are courts-based disadvantages. One of them is a court clog disadvantage that argues that if we have more patent or copyright protection, but generally patent protection, that would create a lot more lawsuits and would gum up the courts. They would not be able to deal with other important issues because all they'd be doing is these patent suits based on the increased patents that the affirmative allowed them to provide. There are other disadvantages in that area about creating situations that the court has to resolve that would also be relevant. We talked a moment ago about all of the lobbying and politics in intellectual property, and that lends itself very well to agenda politics disadvantages that argue that the plan creates a political controversy that would cause problems for another issue on the agenda. Those are called agenda politics DAs because they're based on the idea that the plan hurts something else going on Biden's agenda or on Congress's agenda, or maybe helps something and that thing is bad, but usually hurts something and that thing is good. Finally, in the major disadvantages areas that apply to most affirmatives is the 2024 elections disadvantage. You argue that a particular candidate is going to win the election now and that the plan would cause the public to swing in a different direction, which is bad. So that is a very common disadvantage on this topic. There are also some counter plans. One is separation of powers based counter plans. That means if the plan has the Congress do something, the counter plan could have the courts do it or have part of the executive do it and argue that Congress doing it would be bad. Similarly, if the affirmative has the court do something, you could argue that Congress or the executive could do it instead and that the court doing it would be bad. So those are separations of powers based counter plans. There are also some proposals that suggest that instead of dealing with intellectual property at the country level, we should be dealing with it multilaterally, meaning internationally in multilateral groups, whether that's through the World Trade Organization or other organizations that we're part of. They should be in charge of setting the questions about intellectual property. And so instead of dealing with it at the United States level, at the United States federal government level, we should have an international coalition do it. There are other counterplans that say that we should not strengthen intellectual property rights. Instead, we should abolish intellectual property or we should reform intellectual property. Maybe we should not have patents at all, or maybe we should have much weaker patent protection. So instead of establishing an increase in intellectual property rights, it would decrease them and argue that they are bad for a variety of reasons. There are some patent process counterplans that suggest that we should change the way the patent process is done rather than just strengthening patents. And there are some court process counterplans that argue that the process for the way things go through the courts would be problematic. The final area to look at is topic-based critiques. There are, of course, lots of critiques that are read on every topic, but the ones that are sort of based in the concept, directly in the concept of intellectual property. The first is, unsurprisingly, a capitalism critique. Any topic that includes the word property in the resolution, presumably, is pretty tied to the concept of capitalism, and certainly intellectual property is very much tied to the concept of capitalism. There is a sort of general capitalism critique that just argues that capitalism in general is bad. There is also a racial specific capitalism critique that argues that the way intellectual property is deployed happens along particular racial lines that creates problems and is deployed against particular groups. So those are both versions of a capitalism critique. Another similar but not necessarily exactly the same critique is a colonialism critique that argues that intellectual property rights are designed to protect particular privileged groups in society and wealthy countries against non-wealthy countries. That we talked in the very first video that sort of wealthy countries tend to want stronger intellectual property and newly industrializing countries or less wealthy countries, less powerful countries tend to want less intellectual property rights. And so this argues that the formation of intellectual property and the idea of strengthening intellectual property comes up against problems of colonialism and international colonialism. We've reached the end of the 3-part series on the 2024-2025 intellectual property topic. I hope everyone has a wonderful debate season and happy debating.